the Oxford Union. And before the debate, I was with several of the students. We were discussing a variety of things for a couple hours at a dinner. And toward the end of the dinner, a girl that had been one of the diners pointed out, she said, you know, you're just not what I was looking for. So I asked her, what were you looking for? I knew what she was looking for. She was looking for the horns that had been created by the press. And those horns mean she was looking for someone who was out to kill all white people, who was a segregationist, a rabble-rouser, an irrational, an extremist, subversive, seditious, someone who couldn't hold a conversation with just anyone. This is what she was looking for, because she was looking for something whose image she only knew from what she had read by a very biased press, a press that has perfected image making to a science. And then they use these images to make people love whom they will and hate whom they will. Not based upon what the people themselves discover for themselves, but based strictly upon the image that the press wants to create and then project to the world. So in both instances, they didn't see the horns. Perhaps the horns were there, but they were well hidden. So I just take time to mention that because it's very dangerous for you and me to form the habit of believing anything completely about anyone or any situation when we only have the press as our source of information. It's always better, if you don't want to be completely in the dark, to read it. But don't come to a conclusion until you have an opportunity to do some personal, first-hand investigating for yourself. And if you ever are going to hold a position of leadership, along with which goes a great deal of responsibility, my advice to you would be just that, to be very careful about letting others create images for you. Always examine for yourself. The American press, in fact the FBI, use press to create almost any kind of image they want of anyone on the local scene. And then you have other police agencies of an international stature that's able to use the world press to create images of anyone whom they want or anything that they want. And if the press is able to project someone in the image of an extremist, no matter what that person says or does from then on is considered by the public as an act of extremism. No matter how good it is, because it's done by this person who has been projected as an extremist, no matter what it is, or how good it is, or how positive it is, or how constructive it is. The people who have been misled by the press have a mental block, and the press knows this. If the press can project someone as subversive, or a group as subversive, no matter what that group does, is looked upon as subversive. They could run and save someone from drowning in the middle of the Hudson, but it's still, the act is looked upon with suspicion, because the press has been used to create suspicion toward that certain image. If a person is projected by the press in an image that's an image of irresponsibility, then no matter how responsible that person's actions may be, the people look upon that act as an irresponsible act. And I point these things out especially for you and me, those of us who are trying to come from behind, and not get ahead, but at least get even. If we aren't aware, we'll find that all these modern methods of trickery that they have perfected to a science will be used, and we will be maneuvered into thinking that we're getting freedom or thinking that we are making progress when actually we will be going backward. Likewise, if they can project you in the image or project someone in a violent image or in the image of someone who goes for violence, and you accept that image, then whatever that person becomes involved in, as far as you're concerned, he believes in violence. He could save a baby from the path of a car, but you don't see someone saving a baby from the path of a car. You see someone who believes in violence. And these methods have been used very skillfully by the power structure, the national power structure as well as the international power structure. And one of the things that you and I, as an oppressed people, should be on guard against, as I said, is to be very careful about letting anyone paint our images for us. The world press, as well as the American press, can make the victim of a crime look like the criminal, and can make the criminal himself look like he's the victim. You don't think that this is possible for someone to do that to your mind. Since I can see that America itself is a society where there is no brotherhood, and that this society is controlled primarily by racists and segregationists, and it is, who are in Washington, D.C. in positions of power, and from Washington, D.C. they exercise the same forms of brutal oppression against dark-skinned people in South and North Vietnam, or in the Congo, or in Cuba, or in any other place on this earth where they're trying to exploit and oppress. This is a society whose government doesn't hesitate to inflict the most brutal form of punishment and oppression upon dark-skinned people all over the world. To wit, right now, what's going on in and around Saigon and Hanoi, and in the Congo and elsewhere. They are violent when their interests are at stake. But with all that violence that they display at the international level, when you and I want just a little bit of freedom, we're supposed to be nonviolent. They're violent. They're violent in Korea, they're violent in Germany, they're violent in the South Pacific, they're violent in Cuba, they're violent wherever they go. But when it comes time for you and me to protect ourselves against lynchers, they tell us to be nonviolent. That's a shame, because we get tricked into being nonviolent. And when somebody stands up and talks like I just did, they say, well, he's advocating violence. Isn't that what they say? Every time you pick up your newspaper, you hear where one of these things has written into it that I'm advocating violence. And I have never advocated any violence. I've only said that black people who are the victims of organized violence perpetrated upon us by the Klan, the Citizens Council, and many other forms, we should defend ourselves. And when I say we should defend ourselves against the violence of others, they use their press skillfully to make the world think that I'm calling on violence, period. And I wouldn't call on anybody to be violent without a cause. But I think the black man in this country, above and beyond people all over the world, will be more justified when he stands up and starts to protect himself, no matter how many necks he has to break and heads he has to crack. I saw in the paper where on the television, where they took this black woman down in Selma, Alabama, and knocked her right down on the ground, dragging her down the street. You saw it. You're trying to pretend like you didn't see it because you knew you should have done something about it and didn't. It showed the sheriff and his henchmen throwing this black woman on the ground, and Negro men standing around doing nothing about it, saying, well, let's overcome them with our capacity to love. What kind of phrase is that? Overcome them with our capacity to love. And then it disgraces the rest of us, because all over the world the picture is flashed showing a black woman with some white brutes with their knees on her, holding her down, and full-grown black men standing around watching her. Why, you are lucky to let you stay on earth, much less stay in the country. When I saw it, I dispatched a wire to Rockwell. Rockwell was one of the agitators down there. Rockwell is Lincoln Rockwell. And the wire said, in essence, that this is to warn him that I
supremacists by Elijah Muhammad's separatist black Muslim movement, and that if Rockwell's presence in Alabama causes harm to come to Dr. King or any other black person in Alabama who's doing nothing other than trying to enjoy their rights, then Rockwell and his Ku Klux Klan friends would be met with maximum retaliation from those of us who are not handcuffed by this nonviolent philosophy. And I haven't heard from Rockwell since. And brothers and sisters, if you and I would just realize that once we learn to talk the language that they understand, they will then get the point. You can never reach a man if you don't speak his language. If a man speaks the language of brute force, you can't come to him with peace. Why, good night. He'll break you in two, as he has been doing all along. If a man speaks French, you can't speak to him in German. If he speaks Swahili, you can't communicate with him in Chinese. You have to find out what does this man speak. And once you know his language, learn how to speak his language. And he'll get the point. There'll be some dialogue, some communication, and some understanding will be developed. And you've been in this country long enough to know the language the Klan speaks. They only know one language. And what you and I have to start doing in 1965, that's what you have to do, because most of us already been doing, is start learning a new language. Learn the language that they understand. And then when they come up on our doorstep to talk, we can talk. And they will get the point. There will be a dialogue. There will be some communication. And I'm quite certain there will then be some understanding. Why? Because the Klan is a cowardly outfit. They have perfected the art of making Negroes be afraid. And as long as the Negro is afraid, the Klan is safe. But the Klan itself is coward. They never come, one of them never come after one of you. They all come together. Sure, they're scared of it. And you sit there when they put the rope around your neck saying, forgive them, Lord, they know not what they do. As long as they've been doing it, they're experts at it. They know what they're doing. Since the federal government has shown that it isn't going to do anything about it, but talk, then it is a duty. It's your and my duty as men, as human beings. It's our duty to our people to organize ourselves and let the government know that if they don't stop that Klan, we will stop it ourselves. And then you'll see the government start doing something about it. But don't ever think that they're going to do it just on some kind of morality basis. No. I want to stop it. You can't stop it with love. Not love of those things down there. No. So, we only need vigorous action in self-defense. And that vigorous action, we feel, we're justified in initiating by any means necessary. Now, the press, behind something like that, they call us racist and people of violence in reverse. This is how they psycho you. They make you think that if you try to stop the Klan from lynching you, you're practicing violence in reverse. Take up on this. I hear a lot of you all parrot what the man says. You say, well, I don't want to be a Ku Klux Klan in reverse. Well, you should. If a criminal comes to rob your house, brother, with his gun, just because he got a gun and he's robbing your house, and he's a robber, it doesn't make you a robber because you grab your gun and run him out. No. See, the man is using some tricky logic on you. And And he has absolutely got a Ku Klux Klan outfit that goes through the country frightening black people. Now, I say that it's time for black people to put together the type of action and unit that is necessary to pull the shit off of them so they won't be frightening black people any longer. That's all. And when we say this, the press calls us racist in reverse. Don't struggle only within the ground rules that the people you're struggling against has laid down. Why? This is innocent. But it shows you how they can do it. They make with skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like the criminal, and the criminal look like the victim. Right now, in New York, we had a couple cases where police grabbed the brother and beat him unmercifully, and then charged him with assault and battery. They use the press to make it look like he's the criminal and they're the victim. This is how they do it. And if you study how they do it here, then you'll know how they do it over here. It's the same game going all the time. And if you and I don't awaken and see what this man is doing to us, then it'll be too late. They may have the gas ovens already built before you realize that they're hot. One of the shrewd ways that they use the press to project us in the eye or image of a criminal, they take statistics. And with the press, they feed these statistics to the public, primarily the white public. Because there are some well-meaning persons in the white public as well as bad-meaning persons in the white public. And whatever the government is going to do, it always wants the public on its side. And whether it's the local government, state government, federal government. So they use the press to create images. And at the local level, they'll create an image by feeding statistics to the press, through the press, showing the high crime rate in the Negro community. And as soon as this high crime rate is emphasized through the press, then people begin to look upon the Negro community as a community of criminals. And then any Negro in the community can be stopped in the street, put your hands up, and they pat you down. You might be a doctor, a lawyer, a preacher, or some other kind of Uncle Tom. And but despite your professional standing, you'll find that you're the same victim as the man who's in the alley. Just because you're black and you live in a black community, which has been projected as a community of criminals. This is done. And once the public accepts this image also, it paves the way for a police state type activity in the Negro community. They can use any kind of brutal method to suppress blacks because they're criminals anyway. And what has given this image? The press. Paying rent, buying the groceries. But they don't own the stores, clothing stores, food stores, any kind of store. They don't even own the homes that they live in. This is all owned by outsiders. And in these rundown apartment dwellings, the black man in Harlem pays more money for it than the man down in the rich Park Avenue section. It costs us more money to live in the slums than it costs them to live down on Park Avenue. And black people in Harlem know this. And the white merchants charge us more money for food in Harlem. And it's the cheap food. It's the worst food. We have to pay more money for it than the man has to pay for it downtown. So black people know that they're being exploited and that their blood is being sucked and they see no way out of it. So finally when the thing is stopped, the white man is not there. He's gone. The merchant is not there. The landlord is not there. get his property. This is what makes them knock down the store windows and set fire to things and things of that sort. It's not that they're thieves, but they try and project the image to the public that this is being done by thieves and thieves alone. And they ignore the fact that no, it is not thievery alone. It's a corrupt, vicious, hypocritical system that has castrated the black man, and the only way the black man can get back at it is to strike it in the only way he knows how. They use the press. That doesn't mean that all reporters are bad. Some of them are good, I suppose. But you can take their collective approach to any problem and see that they can always agree when it gets to you and me. When they do this affair, which is designed to honor outstanding black Americans, is it not? You find nothing in the newspapers to give the slightest hint that this affair was going to take place. Not one hint. You see, you have many sources of news. If you don't think that they're in cahoots, what? They're all interested, or none of them are interested. It's not a staggering thing. They're not going to say anything in advance that's being given by any black people who believe in functioning beyond the scope of the ground rules that are laid down by the liberal element of the power structure. When you begin to start thinking for yourself, you frighten them. And they try and block your getting to the public for fear that if the public listens to you, then the public won't listen to them anymore. And they got certain Negroes whom they have to keep going up in the paper to make them look like leaders, so that the people will keep on following them, no matter how many knocks they get on their head following him. This is how the man does it. And if you don't wake up and find out how he does it, I tell you, they'll be building gas chambers and gas ovens pretty soon. I don't mean those kind you got at home in your kitchen. Another example at the international level of how skillfully they use this trickery was in the Congo. In the Congo, airplanes were dropping bombs on African villages. African villages don't have a defense against bombs, and the pilot can't tell who the bomb is being dropped upon. When a bomb hits the village, everything goes. And these pilots, filled with flying planes filled with bombs, dropping these bombs on African villages, were destroying women, were destroying children, were destroying babies. You never heard any outcry over here about that. And it had started way back in June. They would drop bombs on African villages that would blow that village apart and everything in it. Man, woman, child, and baby. No outcry. No sympathy, no support, no concern, because the press didn't project it in such a way that it would be designed to get your sympathy. They know how to put something so that you'll sympathize with it, and they know how to put it so you'll be against it. I'm telling you, they are masters at it. And if you don't develop the analytical ability to read between the lines in what they're saying, I'm telling you again, they'll be building that gas ovens. And before you wake up, you'll be in one of them, just like the Jews ended up in gas ovens over there in Germany. You are in a society that's just as capable of building gas ovens for black people as Hitler's society was. This was mass murder in the Congo of women and children and babies. But there was no outcry even from the white liberals, even from your friends. Why? Because they made it appear that it was a humanitarian project. They said that the planes were being flown by American-trained anti-Castro Cuban pilots. This is propaganda too. As soon as you hear that American-trained, you say, oh, that's all right, that's us. And the anti-Castro Cubans, oh, that's all right too, because if they're against Castro, whoever else they're against, that's good, because Castro is a monster. But you see how step by step they grab your mind? And these pilots are hired. Their salaries are paid by the United States government. They're called mercenaries, these pilots are. And a mercenary is not someone who kills you because he's patriotic. He kills you for blood money. He's a hired killer. That's what a mercenary means. And they're able to take these hired killers, put them in American planes with American bombs, and drop them on African villages, blowing to bits, black men, black women, black children, black babies, and you black people sitting over here cool, like it doesn't even involve you. You're cool. They'll do it to them today and do it to you tomorrow. Because you and I and they are all the same. They call it a humanitarian project, and that they're doing it in the name of freedom. And all of this, these glorious terms are used to pave the way in your mind for what they're going to do. Then they take Shombi. You heard of Shombi. He's the worst African that was ever born. The lowest type that was ever born. He's a murderer himself. He's the murderer of Lumumba, the former prime minister of the first and only rightful prime minister of the Congo. He's a murderer with an international stature as a murderer. Yet the United States government went and got Shombi in Spain and put him as the head of the Congolese government. Imagine that. This is criminal. Here's a man who's a murderer. So the United States takes him, puts him over to Congo, and supports his government with your tax dollars. Now, in other words, they hire him to occupy the position as head of state over the Congo. A killer. He is a hired killer himself. His salary paid by the United States government. And he turns his first move is to bring in South Africans who hate everything in sight. He hires those South Africans to come and kill his own Congolese people. And the United States again pays their salary. You know, there's something to think about. How do you think you would feel right now if some Congolese brothers walked up to you? They look just like you. Don't think you don't look Congolese. You look as much Congolese as the Congolese got. They got all kinds of Congolese over there. How would you feel if one of them walked up to you and asked you about what your government is doing in the Congo? I was asked that when I was over there. But they didn't have to come to me like that, because they know where I stand automatically anyway. And I'm thankful to the press for letting everybody know where I stand. But you have no explanation. Your tongue stays in your mouth. And you have to then go to the extreme to convince them that you don't go along with what the United States government is doing in the Congo. But again, your image making comes into importance here. And they justify the usage of Shombi as the present head of state by saying he's the only African who can unite or bring unity to the Congo. Has he brought unity to the Congo? Because see, this is their game. And their real reason for wanting Shombi there was so that Shombi could invite them to come in. No other African head of state would have dared to invite outside powers, so they put Shombi there. And as soon as Shombi got there, then he invited them to bring paratroopers from Belgium in the United States transport planes to try and recapture the Congo. This is all a cold-blooded act on the part of your Western powers, namely the Western powers here in the United States, interest in the United States, in England, in France, and in Belgium, and so forth. They want the wealth of the Congo, plus its strategic geographic position. The step-by-step process that was used by the press, first they fan the flame in such a manner to create hysteria in the mind of the public, and then they shift gears and fan the flame in a manner designed to get the sympathy of the public. And once they go from hysteria to sympathy, the next step is to get the public to support them in whatever act they're getting ready to go down with. You're dealing with a cold, calculating, international machine that's so criminal in its objectives and motives that it has the seeds of its own destruction right within it. They use the press to emphasize that white hostages are being held by cannibals. Imagine that. Or white priests, white missionaries, white nuns. They don't say nuns. White nuns. You know what the paper said right in Detroit. White missionaries. Not just a missionary. A white nun. As if there's a difference between a white nun and a black nun. Or a white priest and a black priest. Or if the life that's in a white skin is more valuable than a life within a black skin. This is what they're implying. And the press, look at the press when this thing was going on. And you see what I'm talking about. They're vicious in their whiteness. But still, I wouldn't judge them just because they're white, or they call me a racist. Judge them by their deeds, by their conscious behavior. And you know how they've been consciously behaving in the Congo, and how they consciously behave in Vietnam, and how they consciously behave right now in Alabama and Mississippi. So you and I got to get conscious and start behaving in a way that we can offset this thing before it's too late. And this is what they don't want to hear. One more thing concerning Shambi. If you notice, and I must go all the way over there on the African continent in order to give you a better understanding of what's going on right here. The next thing that is good to know about Shambi, no Congolese troops have ever won any victories whatsoever for the present Congolese government. Congolese soldiers won't even fight unless they're forced to. But the fighters in the Congo were the freedom fighters, whose brothers from the Oriental Eastern Province. And they fought with stones and sticks and rocks, spears and arrows. And the only time they had a gun was when they got some soldier who had it, and they killed him and take his gun. But they were winning. They took over 2/3 of the Congo, showing you they were fighting from their heart. Whereas these other people, their heart wasn't in it. And because of the fighting spirit of these people, it will be impossible for Shambi to remain as head of state over the Congo without additional troops, white troops, constantly being brought in from South Africa or elsewhere. But sooner or later, these troops are going to give out, and then America is going to have to increase her troops, like she did in South Vietnam. You know, she's not at war over there. You know, they're only over there advising. They got about 20,000 advisors, you know, on the front line. But it's not a war. It's just they're in an advisory capacity while they insult the intelligence of their own public. And they're going to have to end up doing the same thing in the Congo. They'll be trapped. They'll have to eventually send American troops to occupy the Congo because the African freedom fighters are going to fight. They're not going to give up 1 inch without fighting back. And this is something that you should know, that they realize now on the African continent what's at stake and how much all of these Western powers have in common in what they're doing in cahoots with each other behind the closed door. So on the African continent, they are training Africans to be soldiers so that they can invade one of these countries and take it over and give it to their rightful people. One of the reasons, one of the last things I must say concerning the Congo, not only do they not intend for the Congo to fall into African hands because of its mineral wealth, and it has the greatest deposits of some of the richest elements or minerals of any other area on this earth. They don't intend to give it up because of its wealth. Another reason they don't intend to give it up, if you look at the map, you'll see that it is so strategically located geographically. Wherein, if a real, genuine African government were to come in power over the Congo, then it would be possible for African troops from all countries to invade Angola, which is a Portuguese possession. And if Angola fell, and it would fall, then it would only be a matter of time before Southwest Africa, Southern Rhodesia, and Bechuanaland also would fall, and it would put African troops right on the border of South Africa. And that's where they really want to get, at that man down there in South Africa. And the United States interests are involved in blocking this? Yes. Some of these liberals who grin in your face like they're your best friend, they got money tied up in the Congo. Some of the most powerful political figures in this country, some of them governors over states, got interest in the Congo and got interest in South Africa and got interest all over the African continent and go there. And as the Africans awaken and realize this, it makes them filled with the incentive to never rest until that exploiter is driven out. So now, what effect does this have on us? Why should the black man in America concern himself, since we've been away from the African continent for 400 years, 300 or 400 years? Why should we concern ourselves? What impact does what happened to them have upon us? Number one, first you have to realize that up until 1959, Africa was dominated by the colonial powers, and by the colonial powers of Europe having complete control over Africa, they projected the image of Africa negatively. They projected Africa always in a negative light. Jungles, savages, cannibals, nothing civilized. And naturally, it was so negative until it was negative for you and me. And you and I began to hate it. We didn't want anybody to tell us anything about Africa, much less call us an African. And in hating Africa and hating the African, we end up even hating ourselves without even realizing it. Because you can't hate the roots of a tree and not hate the tree. You can't hate your origin and not end up hating yourself. You can't hate Africa and not hate yourself. And you show me one of these people over here who have been thoroughly brainwashed, who has a negative attitude toward Africa, and I'll show you one that has a negative attitude toward himself. You can't have a negative attitude toward yourself, a positive attitude toward yourself, and a negative attitude toward Africa at the same time. To the same degree that your attitude, that your understanding of, an attitude toward Africa becomes positive, you'll find that your understanding of and your attitude toward yourself will also become positive. And this is what the white man knows. So they very skillfully made you and me hate our African identity, our African characteristics. And you know yourself, and we have been a people who hated our African characteristics. We hated our hair. We hated the shape of our nose. We wanted one of those long, dog-like noses, you know. Yeah. We hated the color of our skin. Hated the blood of Africa that was in our veins. And in hating our features and our skin and our blood, while we had to end up hating ourselves. And we hated ourselves. Our color became to us a chain. We felt that it was holding us back. Our color became to us like a prison, which we felt was keeping us confined, not letting us go this way or that way. And we felt that all of these restrictions were based solely upon our color, and the psychological reaction to that would have to be that as long as we felt imprisoned or chained or trapped by black skin, black features, and black blood, that skin and those features and that blood that was holding us back automatically had to become hateful to us. And it became hateful to us. It made us feel inferior. It made us feel inadequate. It made us feel helpless. And when we fell victim to this feeling of inadequacy or inferiority or helplessness, we turned to somebody else to show us the way. We didn't have confidence in another black man to show us the way, or black people to show us the way. In those days, we didn't. We didn't make a black man to do anything but play some horn, some sounds, and make you happy with some songs, and in that way. But in serious things, where our food, clothing, and shelter was concerned, and our education was concerned, we turned to the man. We never thought in terms of bringing these things into existence for ourselves. We never thought in terms of doing things for ourselves, because we felt helpless. And what made us feel helpless was our hatred for ourselves. And our hatred for ourselves stemmed from our hatred of things African. Around about 1955, they had the Bandung Conference in Indonesia. And at that time, the Africans, the Asians, the Arabs, all of the non-white people got together and agreed to de-emphasize their differences and emphasize what they had in common, and form a working unity. And it was the working unity, the spirit of Bandung, created a working unity that made it possible for the Asians who were oppressed, the Africans who were oppressed, and others who were oppressed, to work together toward getting independence for these other people. And it was the spirit of Bandung that brought into existence this working unity that made it possible for nations that didn't have a chance to become independent, they did come into their independence. And most of this began along in 1959. And at 59, the spirit of African nationalism was fanned to a high flame. And we then began to witness the complete collapse of colonialism. France began to get out of French West Africa. Belgium began to make moves to get out of the Congo. Britain began to make moves to get out of Kenya, Tanganyika, Uganda, Nigeria, and some of these other places. And although it looked like they were getting out, they pulled a trick that was colossal. In that when you're playing basketball and they get you trapped, you don't throw the ball away. You throw it to one of your teammates who's in the cliff. And this is what the European powers did. They were trapped on the African continent. They couldn't stay there. They were looked upon as colonial imperialists. So they had to pass the ball to someone whose image was different. And they passed the ball to Uncle Sam. And he picked it up and has been running it for a touchdown ever since. He was in the clear. He was not looked upon as one who had colonized the African continent. But at that time, the Africans couldn't see that though the United States hadn't colonized the African continent, he had colonized 22 million blacks here on this continent. Because we were just as thoroughly colonized as anybody else. When the ball was passed to the United States, it was passed at a time when John Kennedy came into power. He picked it up and helped to run it. He was one of the shrewdest backfield runners that history has ever recorded. He surrounded himself with intellectuals, highly educated, learned, and well-informed people. And their analysis told him that the government of America was confronted with a new problem. And this new problem stemmed from the fact that Africans were now awakened. They were enlightened. And they were fearless. They would fight. So this meant that the Western powers couldn't stay there by force. And since their own economies, European economy and the American economy, was based upon their influence, continued influence over the African continent, they had to find some means of staying there. So they used the friendly approach. They switched from the old, open, colonial, imperialistic approach to the benevolent approach. They come up with some benevolent colonialism, philanthropic colonialism, humanitarianism, or dollarism. Immediately, everything was Peace Corps, crossroads. We've got to help our African brothers. Pick up on that. Can't help us in Mississippi. Can't help us in Alabama or Detroit, out here in Dearborn, where some real Ku Klux Klan live.